All right. Representative Talarico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. You know, I'm a supporter of high-quality curriculum, and in fact, I initially supported the bill by Chairman Buckley. And you and I have worked on high-quality curriculum for a long time. And so just want to thank you for your commitment to curriculum, and thank you for your work in this area. And I think if we do this right, it can be a game changer for teachers and students across the state. I also want to say before I ask a few questions that I also believe that students should learn about the major world religions in school. They need it to understand the world, understand literature, understand their culture, understand other cultures. So I want to ask some basic questions about this new curriculum before I get into some bigger questions, just so we're all on the same page. I also want to clarify that I'm going to use the word lesson, and when I use the word lesson, I mean the subsection of curriculum under a unit, not the colloquial meaning of unit. So is it true that the state of Texas bought an elementary school reading curriculum from a national publisher and made changes to that curriculum?
I think generally yes.
Is it true that the original curriculum included lessons on the major world religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and Islam, in addition to Christianity?
I think so, but honestly, I didn't read the entire set, so I'd have to ask our team if there were some of those lessons in there. But I remember seeing some of that content.
Yeah,
I don't know if all of those religions were referenced or just a subset.
So in grade 2, in the original curriculum, in unit number 2, Early Asian Civilizations, there's lesson 3, Hindus and Hinduism, lesson 7, Buddhists and Buddhism, and then there's unit number 4, Early World Civilizations, lesson 14 is Judaism, lesson 15 is Christianity, and lesson 16 is Islam. Is it true that the state of Texas, in this new curriculum, in those revisions, removed the lesson on Islam?
So you have to go back quite a ways. So the materials that were piloted were not the same even initially. And so I'm not sure that the pilot materials ever actually included those lessons, even our sort of initial pilot lessons.
So in the original curriculum, those lessons I just mentioned, are they still in the Texas curriculum that we've created?
I think if you go back to when this began in 2020, I don't think those lessons were there then.
Were they in the original amplified curriculum, the ones I just listed out?
From your perspective, yes, I have no reason to think that they weren't. So we may be sitting on the underlying intellectual property to use those lessons, and they're just not in the materials.
So they're not. So the lesson on Islam, the lesson on Judaism, the lesson on Hinduism, and the lesson on Buddhism are not in the current revised version of the curriculum.
I do know that there are lessons that reference Islam throughout the product. I don't know exactly where. So
and I don't mean references. I just mean proper lessons as a subsection of a unit. Is that your understanding?
I'm sorry, say the question one more time.
So the lessons, meaning a full lesson as a subsection of a unit, those lessons that I just cited under those 2 units about these different world religions, they don't appear in the new Texas version of the curriculum.
I don't know if those lessons, I'm pretty sure those lessons were not included in the pilot, and so they're not in the current materials either.
Okay. And is it true that the state of Texas added multiple sections on Christianity and wrote new lessons teaching Bible stories to elementary school children?
There were changes to a variety of the reading passages. There was a pretty significant rewrite that happened to the underlying product as a result of 1605, also as a result of feedback from teachers. Some of those lessons reference common stories of a religious nature. So there's references to stories on Aesop's fable. There's references to stories from different religious traditions.
So just want to ask my question again. So is it true that we added new sections on Christianity and wrote new lessons teaching Bible stories? I'm sure that's true about other things, but I'm asking about Christianity and Bible stories.
The thing that's throwing me about your question is the nature of like a Bible story. So if you're talking about like what you would see in a Sunday school classroom, I don't think there's anything in the product that looks like
Sermon on the Mount, Resurrection of Christ, those things have been added to the curriculum.
There's a reference to the resurrection in a unit on ancient Rome. I'm definitely aware of that because that, of course, is relevant to the.
And in kindergarten, a lesson on the Golden Rule, telling the story of the Sermon on the Mount.
There is a kindergarten lesson on the Golden Rule, yes.
That primarily is focused on the Sermon on the Mount. I have it up here if you need to look at it.
I don't know that I would characterize this primarily. It features the Sermon on the Mount.
It
features a variety of things from a religious
about
tradition.
5 paragraphs out of 7 are on the Sermon on the Mount in Christianity.
That doesn't sound right to me. I do know that the Sermon on the Mount is in there.
Okay. Do the major world religions that we just talked about that appeared in the original national curriculum that the state of Texas bought, do they get equal time to Christianity in this new curriculum?
By equal time, you mean because how do you measure equal time? So are you talking about the volume of lessons that reference a particular religious tradition?
Sure.
I mean, there's a whole unit on ancient Roman polytheism. There's a whole unit on ancient Greek polytheism. There are multiple units that reference religious ceremonies of Native Americans. There are units that have references to Islam where relevant. There's units that have reference to Judaism where relevant. There's units that have reference to Christianity where relevant. I don't know that I can quantify with precision in this hearing, like what the breakdown is by different religious tradition or major world religion.
And again, I'm not talking about passing references. I'm talking about lessons, and I'm asking if it's your understanding that those major world religions get equal time to Christianity. Is your answer no, or you don't know?
Again, I would have to go through and quantify. The thing to bear in mind is this is still a reading language arts product, so you're gonna be focused on language more than anything else. So in that case, you're going to be looking at what has influenced the English language more than anything else.
Is it true that the state of Texas deleted every mention of Islam's Prophet Muhammad from the new curriculum, despite him being the most central figure in a religion practiced by 500,000 Texans?
I don't actually know the answer to that question.
I can tell you, because we went through and reviewed.
Okay. Right.
There is no mention of Islam's Prophet Muhammad, although Muhammad appears multiple times in the world religion sections in the original curriculum.
Okay.
So those have been removed.
I'll take your word for it. I can,
Okay.
I can,
it might be helpful
confirm
to have someone who knows the details of the curriculum at some point for us to be able to get into the details here. Is it true that on page 238 of the new Texas third grade curriculum, teachers are encouraged to play the Christian song "Away in the Manger" in their classrooms?
I mean, I'll have to take your word for it. I don't have it in front of me.
Does the new Texas curriculum encourage teachers to play songs from other religious traditions in their classrooms?
I don't know.
Okay. Is it true that on page 248 of the new Texas third grade curriculum, students learn that, quote, the Bible explains that Jesus rose from the dead? 3 days after his death by the Roman authorities, followers of Jesus visited his tomb and found it empty. An angel appeared and said, he has risen, and led them into the tomb. When the visitors entered the tomb, they found it empty.
I presume you are reading from the instructional material, so I have to believe that that's in there, yes.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is, as you know, Commissioner, I'm a former Texas public school teacher. I'm also a student at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. And so I can tell you there is a difference between teaching and preaching. And in my opinion, these passages, which appear at length throughout the curriculum, I'm surprised you don't know about them, in my reading, they are preaching. Under federal law, schools can teach the Bible as an academic text, but not in a devotional way. In other words, public schools are not Sunday schools. I want to share an example that illustrates the difference and ask if you're familiar. In the original curriculum's Christianity lesson, Messiah, the word Messiah, is defined as, quote, a savior predicted by ancient Hebrews and believed by Christians to be Jesus. In my opinion, that's teaching.
Okay.
It's academic framing. In the new Texas lesson on Christianity, that definition has been deleted. A new definition has been put in place, quote, the Messiah is the Savior sent by God. That's preaching. Do you think some kids at this age might have questions about, for example, Jesus being resurrected from the dead when they're taught that by their teachers?
Certain is a possibility.
How will, as Commissioner of Education, how do you believe teachers will respond to elementary school students when they ask how a human being can rise from the dead?
What we attempt to do is provide training and support to teachers so that as kids ask questions on any subjects that emerge in the lesson, that they can be equipped to handle those conversations. Students don't sacrifice their constitutional rights of freedom of religious expression in a classroom. So, but teachers generally have to remain focused on what is the lesson objective of the lesson, and attempt to redirect conversations when they go any direction back to the lesson objective. This is a common theme for questions to take a lesson off of topic, and then for redirect to be necessary.
Are Texas public school teachers generally trained to respond to deep theological questions in the classroom? On the two natures of Christ or anything like that, are teachers tend?
I would assume that it's not part of the educator preparation framework.
Because again, in my experience, certainly as a seminary student, it takes years of training for most people to wrestle with these deep questions. And in my training as a teacher, it's my understanding that most teachers are not theologians. Is it likely that a teacher, when asked about a religious question, now that we're teaching it in our curriculum, is it likely that the teacher will respond with their own religious beliefs simply because that's what they know? So would an atheist teacher tell their students that Jesus wasn't resurrected and that it's just a story? Or will a Catholic teacher respond based on their church teachings? Will a Presbyterian teacher respond based on their denomination's teachings?
I don't know whether that's likely.
Okay. Why does this new state curriculum refer to the Torah or the Tanakh or the Hebrew Scriptures multiple times as the Old Testament? Jews don't call it the Old Testament.
I'm relatively certain the materials refer to it as the Torah and the Tanakh, and that it also is referred to by Christians as the Old Testament.
It is referred to by Christians, only Christians, as the Old Testament. So at one point in 5th grade's Unit 10, it tells teachers to explain how the Old Testament of the Bible, again, that's a Christian term, Jewish folks would not call it the Old Testament, but explain how the Old Testament of the Bible had many prophecies about a future Savior that are written as fulfilled in the New Testament by Jesus. I was shocked when I read that in the 5th grade curriculum, the idea that the Hebrew Scriptures are predicting Jesus is some Christians believe that, but it's certainly not a view shared by Jews. So can you shed some light on why this is being posited as fact rather than explained as a belief of some Christians?
What I can shed a great deal of light on is the development process that the materials go through. So the feedback that you have provided in this hearing is not inconsistent with other feedback that we have gotten during the IMRA review process. The IMRA review process then allows us to the team and the vendors that we use go through and modify content where the feedback would warrant some amount of content modification. So we're still in the middle of making those modifications. People were able to see this content in late May as a result of the IMRA process, and so we're undoubtedly going to review whatever feedback that comes in and ensure that we have content that is both faithful to the TEKS and is consistent with what Texas parents want for their kids in public schools.
I appreciate that. On the topic of Jewish belief in this new curriculum, are you aware that Sandy Kress, a former education advisor to George W. Bush, who reviewed this new Texas curriculum, said, quote, "I would argue this is teaching Christianity." Do you have any response to that criticism?
Well, I have spoken to Sandy Kress. So he's provided feedback, and we, like other feedback, we take that into account to ensure that we have the highest quality instructional materials.
Do you, as commissioner, share that concern of Mr. Kress? That this curriculum is teaching Christianity?
No, I don't share that concern, but that doesn't, what I want to make sure is that we are responsive to feedback, that we're identifying accuracies and or inaccuracies in the material and make modifications so that this is what Texas families would want for their children to learn while they're in elementary school.
I want to ask you about something that was reported in the news after this was released and ask for your comment. It's been reported that when the original publisher of the original curriculum suggested inserting content from other world religions, the state of Texas rejected that idea. The spokesperson for the national publisher of the original curriculum said that when working with the state of Texas, quote, there was not much appetite for a variety of wisdom texts. There was much more of an appetite for the tie to traditional Christian texts. Did the state of Texas ever reject a suggestion from the national publisher to include content from other world religions other than Christianity?
I don't know that I can say with certainty we would disagree with the assertion in that news story. But to your specific question, we received, I think throughout this process, voluminous text options and had to work through them regardless of the underlying content of the text options.
The curriculum was originally designed by that well-respected national publisher, but the state of Texas made revisions. Can you explain who made those revisions?
So there's a small team at the agency, and then there's a contractor that's sort of the lead general contractor, and they employ, I don't know, hundreds of subcontractors around the country.
Was there any involvement in the development of this curriculum by the Texas Public Policy Foundation?
So to the extent that anybody that works for them would have been involved, it's sort of no different than the hundreds of other people. So there were large numbers of reviewers that sort of signed up and said, I'd like to review some text under development, and we got feedback from them, and then they tried to sort of process whatever feedback they had to make adjustments. Sometimes we would make the adjustments suggested, sometimes we wouldn't. So so that's, okay. There's a bunch of people that have been involved in this project.
Okay, so is it true that the state awarded in the $84 million contract to the Boston Public Consulting Group, or the public consulting group based in Boston, to revise their curriculum, which then gave subcontracts to two officials at the Texas Public Policy Foundation? Is that fair to say?
You'd have to ignore all of the other subcontracts, but I believe there were subcontracts.
One of the subcontracts was to two officials at the Texas Public Policy Foundation.
Yeah.
Okay. To your knowledge, is the Texas Public Policy Foundation an expert in curriculum design?
The feedback that we got, it was from a pretty broad swath of individuals, and so some of those people have specific subject matter expertise on some aspect of the content. Some of them are dyed-in-the-wool pedagogical experts in reading in that grade level. So it's really a broad set of perspectives that we tried to solicit throughout the development process.
Okay. And I know these are a lot of groups and a lot of people, and you oversee a giant operation, so I understand what you're saying. Do you happen to know who the vice chair of the Texas Public Policy Foundation is?
No. You probably do.
I do.
Okay, good.
Tim Dunn.
Tim Dunn is the vice chair. Okay.
Yeah. Were there political considerations to the edits of this curriculum, to your knowledge?
We were what I would characterize as, you think about the State Board of Education's suitability rubric, and you think about the State Board of Education's quality rubric. This is essentially what we are attempting to design against.
And this has also been reported and talked about, but I think there is an answer to this, but I just want to make sure I get your response, which is that this new state curriculum was published 4 days after the Texas Republican Party passed a platform calling on the legislature and the State Board of Education to require instruction on the Bible. Are those two related at all?
They are not.
The new Texas lessons frequently say, according to the Bible or as the Bible explains. Mark Chansey is a religious studies professor at SMU, and he dismissed these as, quote, meager efforts at objectivity. He said the literalistic way the lessons present Bible stories encourage very young children to simply take them at face value. He pointed to a 5th grade lesson on Da Vinci's The Last Supper, in which teachers read a passage from the book of Matthew for added context. Those are some of the Bible stories I was mentioning to you in the beginning. Students, he said, are bound to be left with questions. How did Jesus know someone would betray him? What does Jesus mean when the teacher says the bread is his body and the cup is his blood? Is the teacher ready to explain all the different versions of Eucharistic theology found in different forms of Christianity?
That's a quote from Chancery?
Yes,
Okay.
Chansey.
Or Chansey? Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry, so what's the question?
So the question is are the teachers who are going to use this new state curriculum that teaches about the Eucharist, are those teachers ready to explain all the different versions of Eucharistic theology found in different forms of Christianity?
The design of the lessons, which you've clearly seen, includes sample questions for the teacher based upon each reading passage. Those questions are not going to take somebody to advanced theology because that's not the purpose. The purpose is to build vocabulary and background knowledge.
Right. So teachers, based on what you've said so far, are not prepared to teach or answer questions about theology, although it appears multiple times in this new state curriculum.
Well, the questions that the students are asked in the curriculum are embedded in the curriculum. And each place there's a sample question. There's also what kind of answers to expect from students to try to provide teachers with guidance on how to manage that classroom discussion.
And the reason I'm asking this, Commissioner, and I've expressed this to you in private, is I am concerned when we are mandating that teachers who use this curriculum teach the Bible, teach Christianity, teach theology, that they are not qualified to do that. They are not prepared to do that. And when you're talking about religion, when you're talking about faith, when you're talking about theology, you're working with fire. These are serious topics, the most serious topic in many of our lives. And so to me, this seems not only reckless, it seems that it could do great harm to students, whether they're Christian or not. I want to ask constitutional questions. Does the separation of church and state appear in this new curriculum?
I want to understand your question.
Yes.
You mean the language of the First Amendment of the Constitution? Do you mean like Supreme Court rulings?
Let me clarify then. Does this new curriculum teach students about the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, which prohibits the government from establishing a state religion?
Yeah, so you raised this in a meeting with me. I went back and looked at it. So the First Amendment was discussed, but the verbatim language of the First Amendment wasn't actually in that lesson. So based upon public feedback, the verbatim language is getting added to that lesson.
So the Establishment Clause will be added to this new curriculum?
The actual language of the Establishment Clause.
Okay. Are you worried that if Texas public school teachers use this new state curriculum, those teachers will violate the Establishment Clause by teaching Bible stories in public schools?
No.
Then why does the bill at the bottom of page 5 explicitly give teachers who use this new curriculum immunity for violating the Establishment Clause of the United States Constitution? Here at the bottom.
Yeah, so I think one would posit that there's a variety of things that cause folks to have hesitation, and this is essentially meant to take that off the table. Would be my reading of that statute as a source of concern.
If there's no concern about it, why would we add it to the bill? We don't add any other immunity from any other parts of the Constitution.
Well, your question was to me, whether I had that concern, but there are.
You think other people will have that concern?
There are a lot of other people in the state of Texas, and I can't speak for all of them.
Sure, but we anticipate that will be a concern. That's why we explicitly put it in the bill.
It's hard for me to understand specifically, but it seems like a reasonable supposition.
I know these are tough questions, and I appreciate your honesty. I am for high quality curriculum, as you know. You and I share a passion for that. We have since I first got elected, since you first became commissioner. I'm for high quality curriculum, but not when it violates the United States Constitution. But that is actually not my primary concern. I mentioned in the beginning that in the new kindergarten curriculum, students are taught the golden rule. And the curriculum, when you read it, and I encourage everyone to read it for themselves, it appears to give the primary credit for the golden rule to Jesus of Nazareth. I love Jesus with all my heart, all my soul, all my mind, all my strength, but he wasn't the first person to teach the golden rule. There are a lot of new things that Christianity gave the world, but this teaching is not one of them. Buddha and Moses taught the golden rule thousands of years before Jesus was born. And this new curriculum, in my opinion, violates the golden rule. Like Buddha and Moses, Jesus was most concerned about the outcasts, those who were left out, those who were different. It's, as I've told you in our private meeting, it's hard to be different as a kid. If you're a Jewish kid going to Texas public schools, if you're a Muslim kid going to Texas public schools, if you're a Hindu kid going to Texas public schools, it's hard enough. Now their teacher is teaching Bible stories at the front of the classroom because some politicians here in Austin are forcing them to do so. And with little to no representation for their faith traditions. I'm concerned with how that will make them feel, how that will make their lives harder. When I was a student in Texas public schools in Round Rock ISD, and I still remember today when I was sitting in Miss Cordone's kindergarten classroom in Wells Branch Elementary, right before Christmas, we were all coloring Christmas pictures, which Christmas has always been my favorite holiday. My little sister was born on December 25th. So I was having a great time. And I noticed that one of my dear friends sitting 2 seats away from me wasn't coloring. I asked him why not. And he whispered, because I'm Jewish. I didn't know what that word meant. But I still remember the feeling that my friend was being left out. And so I think if Jesus, who was Jewish himself, read this new curriculum, he would remind us to treat Jewish students as we would want to be treated. Treat Muslim students as we would want to be treated. Treat Hindu and Buddhist students the way we would want to be treated. And if I were them, I wouldn't want the government elevating one religion over my own or over my family's religion. As I said earlier, I believe public schools are not Sunday schools, or as Governor Abbott is fond of saying, schools are for education, not indoctrination. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Harris.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner, Chairman,